So much for meeting with Regis student today and allowing this interview to happen. I know how busy you are. I'm a huge fan of your work, and I know that many students at our Nord Anglia family of schools are very interested to learn from your insight today. In your book, I Was, you talk about your parents and your father's influence on your ideas of engineering. Can you go back and recall their influence on your school life? Maybe you have some special memories you'd like to share with us.
The best memories I have is, well, my father made it very clear to me that school was very important for the rest of your life, and what you were going to learn would depend on getting a job and having money to afford a house and not being on the street with no money at all. He made that sound very horrible. So I wanted to be a good student. I think I was lucky more than anything else. My parents didn't push me in a certain direction, saying you've got to do certain things. Pretty much they let me be free to find what I love to do. And I probably lucked out, and at first I started out very good in math at a very young age. So I was the top math student in all my schools. And mathematics leads to a lot of the sciences, makes them a lot. If you're good at math, you do a lot better in the sciences. So I kind of was always in the leading track for science and mathematics. And aside from that, outside of school is really where I picked up the important learnings of my life that would turn into the career, the inventing computers and doing that sort of thing. I discovered electronics by accident. I would read a certain book and say, wow, I wonder if I could build a radio and send signals to other people typing with a telegraph key. So I did it because I was interested. The book got me interested, and it said, here's how you can order some materials to learn how to do it. So I studied, and that was old style electronics. You don't find that kind of electronics in existence today. You found it when I was young. It was called analog. Now we're in the digital world. Everything is computers, sets of instructions telling computers what to do. And even the design of the computers themselves is very little real electronics. It's mostly thinking out logically how to connect things to happen in the right way. So I discovered computers in elementary school, and I started building projects because I don't know why. I think this is where my father was a big influence. He would say, here's what you might do for a science fair project, and give me some of the training, some of the learning of what it was about. And it was all outside of school. Science fairs are things you do on your own. And then I got so good at having hundreds of parts all connected with wires and knowing how everything worked. So I just became really good at electronics, but I didn't think of myself as special. I had this one little thing that I liked to do, that I had a few friends in the neighborhood that liked doing it, but almost nobody in school did these things. It wasn't a part of school. I did not think it was a part of life that you actually grew up. But then my father was an electrical engineer. So I decided in 6th grade I would be an electrical engineer. I told my father that. And second, I wanted to be a 5th grade teacher because I felt the teachers were so important in our life.
What were your favorite and worst subjects in school?
My favorite subjects were always math and science because I could always get an easy A. Even if I didn't do the homework, it was easy. And I got awards in my schools for that. Electronics in high school was a very interesting course because normally it's called a vocational course. It's not like academics in books. But boy, that was interesting. We got to build projects that actually, you touch them, you move dials, they worked a certain way. I think it was far ahead of what you learn out of just books. I didn't do, although I did well enough in literature, English classes they called it, and history. I did well enough, but I was at B level, not A level. And they just weren't my specialty. I wasn't very good because I was a geek. I became an outsider at school and people didn't talk to me. So because I didn't have the social skills of how to talk, I also didn't have the social skills of how to write things in interesting ways. And when I would read a book, I wouldn't really see what was going on necessarily as well in the people and how important it was and how it related to real people in real life. So when I wrote reports in high school, they were just kind of about what happened in the story. That's what an engineer gets.
What was your favorite thing that you engineered during your student years? And were these made for your science fairs?
It's very hard to say a favorite thing because some of them were so important. The first huge project I did, I remember a couple smaller projects that were important stepping blocks. First huge project had 92 switches for the 92 natural elements, and it had 92 lights for different electron orbits on a big piece of wood that was painted different colors around. And if you flip the switch for an element like carbon, those electrons would light up. And it wasn't as simple. Some people might think, oh, you throw one switch, it turns on one light, two switches turns on, the second switch turns on another light. All of a sudden you get to a certain element, and when you do the next switch, oh, it has to turn off a bunch that were on and turn on other ones. It's a strange, so it had logic in it. And it was such a huge project, and I understood it all. What a learning step, but it still wasn't the ingredients that make a computer. The next year was a big, huge year. This was probably the most important project of my life, and it was for a science fair, and it almost got done. It basically got done, but kind of burned out something the last night. I played every game of tic-tac-toe I could on paper. Anybody could sit down in a weekend and play every tic-tac-toe game possible, and then I made a set of rules. If there's an X here and an O here, here's the move you should make. And I made a whole set of rules, maybe about 50 rules, and each one of those rules would make you never lose tic-tac-toe. And for each rule, I knew that I'd come across a journal by accident that described logic, making decisions, and I asked my father, how do you make one of these things called an OR gate or an AND gate? An AND gate would say, if there is an X in square 1 and nothing in square 2 and an X in square 3, then you should take square 2. That's and. If and this and that and another thing are true. And he showed me how electrons flowed through transistors on a blackboard, and he showed me how it could make the decisions, and that was a huge stepping point. So I built the tic-tac-toe computer on a big, huge piece of plywood, pounding nails in, soldering wires to nails, and it had about 100 transistors, hundreds of diodes and resistors. These are electronic parts of the old days, and nobody else around school had ever seen a transistor. It was that far advanced.
Wow, that's amazing.
Yeah, and then that was in 6th grade. By 8th grade, I was able to build about the same number of transistors, making decisions to add numbers in computer format. Computers were put numbers into zeros and ones. So I'd have to flip switches. Up is a 1, down is a 0. Up is a 1, down is a 0. I had 10 switches, and that can encode numbers in the computer language up to 1023 by these switches, from 0 to 1023. And I had one row of switches and another row of switches, and then I had a button for add or subtract. And this was clever because I saw a design in a book that showed how a logic design could make an adder, and I learned from it how they actually do it. And I saw another one for a subtractor, and I looked at, studied it, and I came up with my own little insertion of a few extra elements that let you do the add or subtract. And then it would light up some lights. So that was a great project. That were real projects. I actually, the thing is, by high school, I taught myself, I learned the definition of a computer, what it looks like. Like a house has a front door, and it has a hallway, and it has 3 rooms on the hallway, and it has an upstairs. That's the architecture of a house. If you know how to build a house, if you are a carpenter, you know how to make the wood in the right shapes, and you build it. Okay, I knew how to build things from my elementary school projects that I just described. I got a manual that then described the computer, the insides, like what it was as a house. I said, I wonder if I can design one. I didn't have any books or anything, and it took a long time, many weeks and many months of errors, and I finally got to where, oh my gosh, I can design a complete computer, at least the brains of it. And then I just started designing them over and over, but they were on paper. And I could never build a project like a science fair because I could never afford one of the simplest parts called a logic gate. I could never afford one to build a computer. I couldn't afford a chip. So I just thought, I'll just design them for fun. I kept trying to get better and better and better at it. And my definition of better was to use fewer parts than I had before. And I got so good that I knew eventually I had tricks in my head to save parts that probably no other human being on Earth had.
How?
Yeah, so then I knew I was good at it. I still did not think it was going to be a job in my life. I thought I only did it for fun. This is my pastime, what you do to pass time.